What's up, guys? I don't have a whiteboard today, and we're gonna do this straight podcast style probably. And also, please ignore my dishwasher in the background. And if anyone comes in, I'm not pausing this video because I don't have time for that. I don't have a plan, so I didn't have a plan last time either, but that's okay. What we're going to be talking about today is we're just starting at the beginning. So, well, I didn't mean to make a pun, but I did on accident. We're going to read in the beginning, blah, 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 Genesis. So, we're starting in the first book of the Torah. Reminder from the last video, there are 5 books. There's Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And those 5 books make up the Torah or the law. And then there's the prophets and the writings, and I don't remember if that's the correct order, but then after that is all of the New Testament. And I really like starting at the beginning because I think it gives you a good foundation for what the point of everything else is. I think a lot of people, when they start to read the Bible, are recommended to start in the Gospels, and I understand that to a degree, which the Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and a lot of people recommend that people who are wanting to learn about Christianity read the Gospels because they are getting to know who Jesus is and everything. But I would recommend, I don't know, I guess it's just for myself, but I like starting in Genesis because the Old Testament gives so much more, it gives so much more background to like the whole point of why there's even the Gospels. And I like understanding the background of things. So I like history a lot. So maybe it's just my personality and what works best for me and what I find interesting. But I really like to understand the why behind people, the why behind things, and the Old Testament is that why. And so it's really important. Genesis is my favorite book by far of the Bible. I could just talk about it on and on and on and on. And the more I read it, the more I dive into it, just the more interesting and intricate it becomes to me. And there really are so many things to learn. I never run out of things that strike me as new and intriguing. So I guess let's just get into it. I think I'll just read things and then make commentary as I'm reading. So, yeah, I'm also going to be reading out of my physical Bible, but I'm also on my computer right here. I have the Blue Letter Bible pulled up. This is a really great resource. If you have internet access, which I'm assuming you do if you're watching this, just Google Blue Letter Bible. The website is blueletterbible.org. And the reason that I like this resource is because it gives you, it breaks down the original writing. Surprise! None of this was written in English, so English is a very new language, and the Old Testament was written mostly in ancient Hebrew, also some in Aramaic, which Aramaic is like a combination of Hebrew and Greek. I know that's not totally accurate, but it's the best explanation I have without going too deep into it. And then the New Testament is written in like a common version of Greek. So the Blue Letter Bible gives you the original everything in the original language, and then it breaks it down and how it's translated and why into English. So I'm sure, I don't know if you can do other languages. I think maybe it's just English. I don't know. You can dive into that if you want to. And then I also really like this website called Sefaria, and that's Sefaria, and it is a great resource for reading the Torah. I like how the translation that it is the Contemporary Torah, the JPS, is the translation into English that the Tanakh is in, and it not only has the Tanakh, but it has the Talmud and the Mishnah and a lot of different liturgies and just interesting things. And if you don't know what anything is that I just said, just know that it all has to do with Judaism. And so, yeah, I don't know. So those are the things that I'm looking on over here. So when I reference them, that's what I'm talking about. So let's go. The creation of the world. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. The darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. So those are verses 1 through 5. Something that I want to say is the Bible is broken up into books, which I already mentioned. So this is the book of Genesis. It's also broken up later in more modern history. It was broken up even further into chapters and verses. And that's not a part of the original stuff. That's just for us today to be able to go back and find something so that it's easy to talk to your friend or talk to someone about something, and reference an actual point. And it's just really for reference purposes. It says nothing about the meaning. Says nothing about the original design of the text. So you don't have to worry about that. It's just for the ease of going back and being able to find something again. So I want to go over just a couple things that stand out to me, which is, first, it says in the beginning. And it's like, in the beginning of what? What does that mean? And I'd say I really like I just mentioned the Contemporary Torah translation, which translates it a little bit differently, that first line, which is, when God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and a wind from God sweeping over the water. Those are the first two lines. You can tell it's translated a little bit differently. And so it's not saying that it's in the beginning of anything existing. It's saying that it's in the beginning of God creating the heaven and the earth. So it's believed that God existed before heaven and earth existed, and that he was not a created being, so that he has always been in existence and will always be in existence. So the belief is that he's an ever-present being, which means that he's a different type of being than us. And I say he, not necessarily because God is a male. I mean, we don't know, but God is of a different substance than humans, because humans are created by God. And so when it says in the beginning, it's just saying that this is what the story that we're about to read is all about, as God started to create the heavens and the earth. So then it says the earth was without form and void. But then there's this interesting thing. I heard someone talk about it being very chaotic, it being an essence of chaos into order. And I really liked that imagery. The earth was without form and void. Does that mean that, what was it before? Was it just some chaotic thing? It says darkness is over the face of the deep. Well, what's the deep? And just all these things, I don't know. I could go in just rabbit trails all about, was it just nothing? Or was it something, but it wasn't ordered? Or what was it? I don't know. And I think something interesting about the Bible is that it's written in a very particular way to where you have all these questions and you can't get them answered until you read the rest of the story. So when you have these questions as you're reading the Bible, more often than not, you will find a lot of your questions answered by continuing to read the story. It's written in a very particular way where it goes back and fills in those cracks. And it's like a big, I think in the last video I compared it to like a conspiracy theory or something, but it's like, that's not really what I meant, but it's like that same concept of like there's all these like different points that all connect, and you have to zoom out and see the bigger picture for it all to make sense. And it really is just like one story that all ties into itself. So it says darkness was over the face of the deep. So that's just a good imagery to keep in mind. The Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. So that this seems just like a very peaceful imagery, right? It's just like there's just like nothing going on, and God is just there hovering over it. And then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. That seems like, oh, okay. But just like think about that for a second. Like all God had to do was just say something, and whatever he said happened. I'm going to talk a little bit more later about that, why that's significant. But then God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. So that's interesting. Why would God separate the light from the darkness? He didn't just turn all the darkness into light. There was actually value in there being both. So instead of taking away the darkness, he actually adds light and then puts purpose to the darkness. And then we see this kind of back and forth. So it's already beginning. We're seeing this tension. So there's light and there's dark. And saw that the light was good. God separated the light from the darkness. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and morning the first day. So that's really interesting that the beginning of the day was the evening and then morning. So that's why in Jewish practice, the day begins with the sunset. So like that's why there's Friday night Shabbat, because it's actually the beginning of the Sabbath day, which is Saturday. So their days in the Jewish calendar go evening to evening. So there was evening and there was morning the first day. So then we're going to go on. And God said, "Let there be an expanse or a canopy in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters." And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning the second day. So I think this is really interesting because it's another of this tension, right? So we had the light in the day, and now we have like the heaven and the blah blah blah. There's the waters that are above the expanse and the waters that are below the expanse. And God said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that this was good. So now we have the earth and the sea. So there's our other two things. And God saw that it was good. Now I'm going into verse 11. And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seeds." Sorry, I got lost. "And fruit trees bearing fruit, in which their seed, each according to its kind, on the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the third day. So we've got vegetative plants and fruit trees, and everything kind of has this purpose where everything is growing its own seed, it's reproducing its own according to its own kind. So there's this kind of Like God is creating something that creates. And so that's really interesting as well. And God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. So those are like, it's about to say, but that's like the sun and the moon and the stars, because those are the things that give us signs for seasons, for days, and for years, and give light upon the earth. So God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, the sun, and the lesser light to rule the night, the moon, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning the fourth day. So before we saw the purpose of the vegetation, it has a job to create. And then there's also these lights, and yes, they create light, but their job is to rule. So everything that God is creating, he's creating in design of also who he is. So he's creating things that are very, in an interesting way, doing these things that he also does. So then verse 20 says, and God said, let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens. So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. And there was evening and there was morning the fifth day. So we get that command again, to be fruitful and multiply, and to fill the earth. That's very interesting, because we're gonna see that again in a moment. So this is the fifth day, and everything is good. Everything up until this point, God is saying everything that he's created is good. And God said, let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds. And it was so, and God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So now we've got, the birds and the sea animals, and now we've got the land animals. So we've got this other two things here. We had the sun and moon before that. So we're seeing this pattern that I want you to recognize, that there's these two things. There's this continual pattern of two things being created that are very different, that have different purposes, but can't work without each other. And there's a lot of intentionality in that. So then verse 26 says, then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. That's very interesting how the text says that. God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. He uses the word our, which is plural. So that's very interesting. Who is he talking to, right? Why wouldn't he say, then God said, let me make man in my image, after my likeness. So that's very interesting. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So, wow. Now these people, not only do they have a command to be fruitful and multiply like the birds had and like the trees do, but they also have dominion over the earth, just like the stars and the sun and the moon have dominion over specifically? To rule over the day and the night. So he's giving these little jobs to everything, but then to the humans he says, I want to make you like me. I want to make you in my image. And so I'm giving you dominion and also giving you creation, like the ability to create. So just think about that for a second. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So, that is the end of the first chapter, which is very interesting, because we see this literary pattern of God creating these two things over and over again that are different, yet need each other. So it's very interesting. We have the earth and the sea, the sun and the moon, the light and the darkness, the birds and the fish, and then the land animals, and then also the humans. So I want to say a couple of important things. I'm looking right now, blah, 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 for what I'm looking for. Why is it taking so long? Yes. The two different things with the humans, creating them male and female. It says, and at the end he says very good, which that's different, you know. Everything was good, 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 and then at the end it's very good. That's the end of the sixth day. So we have this pattern, and I don't know. I think I want to go into the second chapter as well. What's interesting is that the second chapter is actually the first chapter, but said in a different way. And why would you need to do that? Well, it's because it serves a different purpose. And the second day, the second chapter, it gives some more in-depth detail, whereas the first chapter is very broad, of like, here's everything that happened, really quickly, like bullet point list. And we recognize that pattern of two different things being created simultaneously, or very, on the same day, or whatever, which is important. We go into the second chapter, and it says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. So, honestly, that would be a better ending to the first chapter. I don't know why they decided to split it like that. I wasn't alive when they decided to split all this stuff up, but that's kind of the end of the seventh day story, or the 7-day creation story. Now, I want to say, I want to say this before I go into that. That was a mental note, which is that it's very interesting that God sets aside the seventh day for rest. And so that's why in Jewish practice they have the Sabbath day, where you're not supposed to do any work, and it's also why people go to synagogue on Saturdays. And for this time period, that was very unheard of, that people would be given a day to do nothing, right? This is a time in history when people are like working, and it wasn't normal for the surrounding cultures, in ancient civilizations, to just like give everybody a day off. We'll learn later on in the Torah that there are specific rules about the Sabbath day, And there are specific rules about what you can and can't do, and who you have to give a rest day to, which is everyone, including your animals, which is very interesting and very different than what everyone has done. And that kind of leads me into this whole story is very different than the surrounding cultures at the time. And I think that's the whole point, because there's this question of, do we take this literally? Like, was the earth actually created in 7 days? And some people believe that it was, and some people believe that it wasn't. My personal conviction is that it doesn't matter. And you might be like, what? Like, how can you say that it doesn't matter? And the truth is that I've come to that conclusion because no matter what, whether the earth was really created in 7 days or not, it doesn't change the point of the story, which the point of the story is actually to set Yahweh, who's the name of, we'll learn later. I keep giving you guys spoilers, but we'll learn later in the Torah that the name of this God that's mentioned is Yahweh. And there's a very specific way that this text is written, because whoever wrote it at the time was trying to be very intentional about setting this God apart from the gods of other cultures, of the surrounding cultures, because God wasn't writing Genesis as he was making everything like, ooh, let me keep a journal and give it to these people. Like, no, this was a text written by someone. We don't know who it was. Some people believe it was Moses, and that God gave Moses all of this information at a time, like on the mountain or whatever it was, just because of his close relationship to God. Some people, modern scholars, have come to believe that Genesis and the other books of the Torah, well, no one argues that all 5 books were written by the same person, because you can tell the way that they were written, their writing style, the phrasing that they choose to use. All 5 books were written by the same person, but it's just debated about when. So if it wasn't around the time of Moses, maybe literally him or one of his scribes or something, if it wasn't written then a lot of people today actually believe that it was written during the time of the Babylonian exile, which was in like 5 or 6 BCE. I think that's right. Don't quote me on that, but I thought it would be interesting to actually read you guys part of the Babylonian creation story, because it's very similar. And I think that's important to note, because people will say like, well, the Bible, it's not real, or it's, I have a hard time believing it's true, because there are a lot of other creation stories, not exactly the same, but very, very similar, to where you can't deny that they were all very much influenced by the same belief about the world. And I think that's actually important. And I think for me, it does the opposite effect. And I'll explain why, which is that it doesn't make me believe less that the Bible is true, that there are other creation stories that are very similar of surrounding ancient civilizations. I would say that it actually, to me, proves that this was a belief as a whole of the society, that there was this common understanding of the way that the world was created. And that's intriguing to me, because the fact that this entire group of people that were living there, they're called like Semitic civilizations, because they're all, I think that's right. Hebrew is a Semitic language, if I'm remembering correctly. It's kind of late, but all of the people, whether they were ancient Israelites or Babylonians or Assyrians or whoever, they were all in this general area, and a lot of them share very similar creation stories. And to me, that says that before somebody wrote it down, before people divvied up into their own little towns and whatnot, there was a common belief about the way in which the world was made. And so for me, it says the difference that I should care about between these stories is not what it's saying, but how it's saying it. Because there's even though there's similar things, which I will get to when I read this, there's very key differences. Whoa, that's really close. There are very key differences that I think are important to note that share more about the character of who God is. And for me, I don't think the point is whether the earth was really made in 7 days or not. The point is, who is this God that made everything, and what was, what's his character? What's the point of why I'm here? Like, who am I, and what's my purpose in this whole deal? So the Babylonian creation story is called Enuma Elish, and it's the Babylonian epic of creation. And I will put the links to everything that I'm reading, so that you guys can look at it if it interests you, which is very interesting to me, so maybe it will interest you as well. Basically, the summary of the story is that there were these gods that were born, and there were just these different gods that came out named. There was one, the god of fresh water, Apsu. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these right, okay? There's the god of the salty, bitter water, which was the goddess Tiamat. And then there were also some other gods looped in there. There's like a whole handful of them, and they're all in charge of different things. And they actually end up all making war on each other because apparently like some of them were being loud and annoying, so they decided to kill them. And then they're all fighting each other, and people are dying, and someone gets killed, and from their eyes are created the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and out of Tiamat's corpse, the god Marduk creates the heavens and earth, and he's the one that gives jobs to the different gods. And let's see here, there's all this other stuff, blah blah blah, and then this god E creates Lulu, the first man, to be a helper to the gods in their in whatever they're doing. And this is from, I'm going to read it from Tablet 6, lines 33 to 34, so you can look at this. It says, E created mankind, on whom he imposed the service of the gods and set the gods free. So it says, here's some like greater context. When Marduk heard the word of the gods, his heart prompted him, and he devised a cunning plan. He opened his mouth, and unto E he spoke. That which he had conceived in his heart he imparted unto him. My blood will I take, and bone will I fashion. I will make man, that man may, blah, blah, blah. I will create man who will inhabit the earth, that the service of the gods may be established, and that their shrines may be built. But I will alter the way that other stuff isn't important. So that's interesting. I think it's, and then also, it's very similar at the beginning. This is from the first tablet. I think there's 7 tablets total. The first tablet, so just comparing the language of Genesis, the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void. The darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. That was very fast, but that was a reminder. So let's read the beginning of the first tablet of the Enuma Elish, which says, When in the height heavens was not named, and the earth beneath did not yet bear a name, and the primal Apsu who begot them, and Chaos Tiamat, the mother of them both, their waters were mingled together, and no field was formed, no marsh was to be seen. When the gods none had been called into being, and none bore a name, and no destinies were ordained, then were created the gods in the midst of the heaven. Blah, blah, blah. They need to close the door. 1 second. Let's go close the door so that we can actually hear things. Blah, blah, blah. Kasaya, can you make sure to close this door when you come back up? Okay? Pardon. Let's set you back up here. Lemu and Lemu. Lamu and Laamu were called into being, ages increased, blah, 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 all these people were created, or all the gods, these gods are created, blah, 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 other people are created, blah, 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 but there's just like a lot of fighting, the whole thing, lots of fighting. Let their way, I'm going to read this, let their way be made difficult, and let us lie down again in peace. And hostile to the gods was the counsel Mamu gave. Come, their way is strong, blah, blah, blah. He spoke, someone dies, someone gets shot with an arrow. Oh, they spawn monstrous serpents, sharp of tooth and merciless of fang. With poison instead of blood, she filled their bodies. Fierce monster vipers she clothed with terror. With splendor she decked them. She made them of lofty stature. Whoever beheld them, terror overcame him. Their bodies reared up, and none could withstand their attack. So, she set up vipers and dragons, hurricanes, raging hounds, scorpion men, tempests, fishmen, rams. They bore cruel weapons. So anyways, there's just like this big battle and stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Keeps going. More fighting, more blood, more arrows, lots of monsters. And all this stuff. You get the idea. Something about sesame wine. That sounds weird. I mean, maybe that would be good. I'm not sure. Anyways, you get the basic idea. This is interesting. He, Marduk, made the stations for the great gods, the stars, their images, as the stars of the zodiac he fixed. He ordained the year, and into sections he divided it. For the 12 months he fixed 3 stars. After he had the days of the year images, he found the station of Nibiru, the planet Jupiter, to determine their bounds, that none might err go astray. He set the station of Bel and A along with him. He opened great gates on both sides. He made strong the bold on the left and the right. The moon god he caused to shine forth. The night he entrusted to him. He appointed him, a being of the night, to determine the days every month without ceasing. With the crown he covered him, saying, at the beginning of the month, when thou shinest upon the land, thou commandest the horns to determine 6 days, and on the 7th day to divide the crown. Blah, blah, blah. So that's interesting. So, like, in this story as well, the sun and the moon, well, I didn't read about the sun, but the moon is seen as a god who rules the day, and very similar to this and all this stuff. So, my point in saying all of that is that it's very intentional. And my guess, this is just my hypothesis, not really, because I actually read this. I was like reading something on this. I didn't just make this up. But Genesis is very much, I would say, a commentary on these other creation stories. Like, whoever was reading this, whatever time it was, doesn't matter, because I would say that it was written with the knowledge of these other civilizations and their creation stories as well. And all these people they all kind of believed like different variations of the same thing. So I think that the point that the author is trying to make through this story is not necessarily that this is new information, but it's the fact that God didn't have to fight to create. Like, this was so peaceful, right? God's just like hovering over the chaos. He just has to speak and things happen. He doesn't have to fight anyone or kill them. Hello?
What are you doing? Oh.
I'm just talking about this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's so
Have fun.
Bye.
If you need anything, let me know, okay?
Okay.
Okay, love you. Close the door, please. Okay, so, what was I talking about? Basically, there's all of these things. I would say most notably the purpose of us, right? The purpose of us in this story, in the Enuma Elish, is to serve the gods, to be their slaves, basically, is how it ends up being. And in this story, we're not created to be slaves. We're not created to be servants for God, which is interesting because I know some of you are saying in your heads right now, but Bethany, Jesus describes us as servants, and it's like, we'll get to that later. That's not what I'm talking about right now. In the essence of, we were created to be with God, and we're going to see that more as we continue going in the story. But I just want to prep that idea. I want to prep that idea that the author is creating this story to tell kind of it's like a subtle rebuke to the stories around that we're saying, that are skewing the purpose of who we are and our identity and the character of who God is. So, yes. Anyways, we're going to get into chapter 2, which maybe this is kind of long. This video is already 42 minutes, so I'm going to end it here, but I'm just going to start a new one, like, right here too, but this way it just breaks it up for you. So if you want to go watch chapter 2, please do so. Okay.